Is birthright citizenship settled under the US Constitution? A lot of people will tell you that the answer to that is known and obvious, but that is not true. It is a live debate. My name is Morgan Marietta, professor of politics and law and dean of social science here at UATX. What the President of the United States just did is put in place an executive order that seems to upend long-standing views of birthright citizenship in the United States. What the order says is that going forward, if you are not a permanent legal resident of the United States or you're a visitor in the United States, your children do not gain automatic birthright citizenship. And this seems to be a complete reversal of over 100 years of American tradition. It's very important to understand what a president can do with an executive order. What the president can't do is change the meaning of the Constitution or change the meaning of any federal laws. And what President Trump is claiming to do is to give a new interpretation. He's not claiming to change it. The great question is, does that executive order fit under the US Constitution? To answer that question and to realize why there are actually two powerful arguments going on here, you have to go to the Constitution itself. This is all about the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment is the great amendment after the Civil War. The whole point of the 14th is that it changed our understanding of who a citizen was, who a person was, who has equality, who has dignity, how we deal with these questions. The problem with the 14th Amendment is that it was then ignored for about 100 years. The things that it tried to accomplish, equal protection of the law regardless of race, the protection of rights against the actions not only of the national government, but of the state governments that were doing most of the violations of those rights. Those things were ignored because it is a radical change in the American Constitution. So maybe it shouldn't surprise us that in regard to birthright citizenship, it has also been ignored and misrepresented. To go to the text itself, what the 14th Amendment says at the very beginning, it says that all persons born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens. And the reason that was so important is that people were denying the citizenship of freed slaves. Many times, people have asserted that, well, that obviously means that everyone born here is a citizen by birth. Birthright citizenship is universal and obvious. And I have them read it, and they go through it, and they say, all persons born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. And then they say, look, there it is. It says it right there. Everybody's a citizen. And then I say, see that part in the middle, that limiting clause that says under the jurisdiction thereof? What does that mean? And they say, I don't know. And that's the problem. If you actually read the words of the Constitution, you have to answer the question of what that means. If you ask what it means to be a citizen of any country, what it means is that you are a member of that people. If I said I was a French citizen, as unappealing as that sounds, the French could easily just say no. And it would make no sense if I insisted that I was one. Because citizenship is something that a group of people decide that they are going to grant to other people. In the American understanding of that decision, we believe in popular sovereignty, which is to say that under the Declaration, we have determined that we are a people who control our own destiny. It would be very strange if we didn't control that decision. It's citizens who decide who the other citizens are. So the question that's being asked in the 14th Amendment, which establishes many rights. 14th establishes a right to equal protection and a right to all the privileges and immunities of the Bill of Rights attached to people. Did it really establish a right of citizenship, which is to say that someone can come into the United States and declare themselves by right a citizen? It actually does not say that. It says something really quite different that's attempting to establish equality among the people that we say are citizens. We have historically in the United States been very generous with granting citizenship, but it is a decision of the people, not a right that we have given to anyone who claims it. So that takes us back to the text and this question of the meaning of that phrase, under the jurisdiction. The problem with that is that it's an old piece of language. In the current day, most people think of jurisdiction as being sort of the conflict between county sheriffs when one says to the other, you're out of your jurisdiction, meaning over the county line. And we think of it simply being in the jurisdiction. So a lot of people say when the 14th Amendment says, if you're born in the United States and under the jurisdiction thereof, they think it meant you're born in the United States and you're simply in the United States. But it can't mean that. That would just be redundant and meaningless. Under the jurisdiction of the United States doesn't simply mean in the United States. What it means is that you are under the sovereignty of the United States. I think the best way of explaining it is that it is a mutual relationship. To be under the jurisdiction, under the sovereignty of a country, it means that the country has accepted you under its sovereignty. It has agreed that you are a person that is accepting under its control, and that person has agreed to do so. And the argument that people who are in the United States illegally are not under the jurisdiction as it was meant by the people who wrote and ratified the 14th is that clearly they have not been accepted by the national government as being under its sovereignty. And also, they have not declared themselves to be under the sovereignty. Someone who is evading law enforcement and the laws of a country is clearly not under that country's jurisdiction. If we believe that we have popular sovereignty to decide who is a citizen, who is not, and what the 14th Amendment says is that someone has to be under that jurisdiction, under the agreed sovereignty of the United States, before their children are citizens by birth, what that means, and what the Trump administration is saying, is that they are not birthright citizens. One of the reasons that we know that this is what was meant at the time of the ratification of the 14th is that the 14th Amendment is not framed in universal language. The same amendment excludes hundreds of thousands of Native Americans who were members of the tribe for a very clear reason. There was a Supreme Court case in the 1880s called Elk v. Wilkins. And it was about a member of an American Indian tribe who sued for citizenship. And what the court said, when it explained what under the jurisdiction thereof meant, is it meant under U.S. sovereignty and not under the sovereignty of another nation. And what the native tribes have been historically is other nations with their own governments within the United States. Elk was under the sovereignty of another tribe, not under the accepted sovereignty of the United States, and therefore the 14th Amendment did not apply. 14th Amendment, by its own terms, is not universal. It allows for the popular sovereignty, the decision-making of the United States. Being a citizen, they're very generous in the U.S., is by decision of the people, not by right of the individual. So with all that in mind, why is there an argument on the other side? And it's very important to see what the other side of the argument is. There's an assertion that under the jurisdiction thereof has a very narrow and small meaning. What it means is that it excludes the children of diplomats. So someone is an ambassador, the ambassador to France is here with his wife, and they have a kid. That kid is not a citizen because they're actually under the direct sovereignty of a foreign country. Not just under that sovereignty, but maybe even opposed to the interest of Americans. And then the other argument is that it applies to invading armies. If we ever had an army on U.S. soil and they were having children, they are not under the sovereignty, and therefore those would not be U.S. citizens. Now, to take this seriously would be to say that these two very small exceptions, what the 14th Amendment is saying with this exception, is a very narrow category of people that what they meant to exclude were the very limited number of children of visiting dignitaries. That does not sound reasonable in the sense that that's what they were after, especially in an amendment that excludes remarkable numbers of people who are also born in the United States but not under the jurisdiction. That does not seem like a reasonable interpretation of what the 14th was doing. So I don't think that's really the major argument. The major argument on the other side is actually this. We have done this since the beginning of the country. We've done it for 100 years after the 14th. We have stated so many times to so many people that they are natural-born citizens if born on U.S. soil that it's simply too late to change it. And the question that the Trump administration is bringing to the fore is, what do we do with a misguided interpretation of the U.S. Constitution? Do we say that if we've been wrong for 100 years, we have to continue to be wrong? Or do we have a loyalty to the actual meaning of the Constitution? Is it simply too late to change? I think it is not. I think that one should read the Constitution openly and honestly. We have, in fact, said to generations of people that they are U.S. citizens. Under the new executive order, they will remain U.S. citizens. It's very important to know that this executive order does not change the status of anyone who has already been given U.S. citizenship, and that can't be taken away. It's only for the future, the people born into the future. In regard to that, we can be generous or we can not, but it is constitutionally permissible for the people to decide. The other real argument on the other side is that I've been talking about what's essentially called originalism. You ask about the original public meaning of the Constitution at the time it was ratified. It's a contract at a certain time between the people and the government. The other way to read the Constitution is as a living document. It evolves, it changes, it expands over time. It reflects the values of contemporary Americans, not the Americans of the 1860s when the 14th Amendment was written and ratified. If you believe that the Constitution is living, what is really being argued now is that we have come to believe that people born here have birthright citizenship, and we should maintain that. It is the living and true meaning of the Constitution. Now, as an American citizen, and let me conclude with this, you have to decide how you're reading our basic document. It is owned by you, it was written by you, it is debated by you. You have to either read it as a living document or read it as an original document. I think an original reading is more persuasive, it's more important. It actually achieves the point of the Constitution, which is to restrain the government and tell us what rights we have and which rights we don't have. If you read it as a living document, you have to ask the question then, if we have decided in a living way that birthright citizenship is real, can we then change our mind? Can we decide that we did it for a period of time, but now in the future we're not going to do it because circumstances have changed? I think even in a living reading, you can read it this way. But more importantly, in an original reading, the original meaning of the U.S. Constitution and the 14th Amendment is that it only establishes birthright citizenship for those parents and children under the jurisdiction, under the accepted, open, known sovereignty of the United States government. So to conclude, this is a real argument about real constitutional questions. Don't let anyone tell you that it's impolite to take either position or that it's something that should not be discussed or is settled or is beyond conversation. It is an extraordinarily important debate about how we read the Constitution and how American citizens understand ourselves. And the answer is, perhaps.